You pick them up to calm them, and somehow they cry harder. That is the moment that gets under a parent's skin. A minute ago, they were in the crib or stroller, sounding only mildly unhappy, making those low, repetitive fussing sounds that seem manageable. You step in, do the loving thing, slide your hands under their back, lift them against your chest, and the whole scene changes. Their face tightens, their body stiffens, the cry gets louder, sharper, more ragged. It feels backwards. It can even feel insulting. The obvious explanation comes fast. Maybe you made it worse. Maybe they were settling until you interfered. That sounds reasonable. It is also probably the wrong story, because when a baby between 4 and 6 months cries harder the moment comfort begins, you are often not watching comfort fail. You are watching a nervous system stop holding back. That is not random. What makes this behavior so hard is that it looks like a bad review of your parenting in real time. They were fussing. You helped. Now they are screaming. It is the kind of moment that makes a tired adult think, well, that went beautifully. But babies this age are not judging your soothing the way you are. They are not comparing a quieter before with a louder after and deciding your arms were the problem. They are changing state, and state changes do not always look gentle from the outside. This is not comfort failing. It is distress changing shape. By 4 to 6 months, babies are more socially awake than they were in the early newborn stage. They notice more. They anticipate more. They are better at detecting when someone is available, when a face is near, when a voice is directed at them, when help might actually be entering the room. That matters because distress behaves differently when it is still alone than when it has reached a person. A body can stay half held together until help is close enough to touch. So the first correction is simple but important. Mild fussing does not always mean mild distress. Sometimes it means distress that is compressed, not gone, not small, just not fully expressed yet. A baby alone with discomfort may stay in a kind of narrow loop, restless hands, tense legs, a repetitive whimper, a face that never quite melts into full crying. Adults often read that as not too bad, but what you may actually be seeing is a system conserving itself while it waits to see whether anything changes. The quiet version is not always the whole version. This is where infant caregiver regulation research becomes useful. When researchers observe real episodes of baby distress and adult response, they do not always find a straight line from fussing to comfort to silence. Quite often, the moment a responsive adult enters and begins to soothe, the signal gets bigger first. The baby arches more, cries harder, grabs, buries the face, or lets out a fuller, more desperate sound before settling later. An adult might expect good comforting to shrink the crying immediately, but the early phase of soothing is not always reduction. Sometimes it is release. That changes the entire meaning of the pickup. Picture the crib scene again. Before you lift them, the baby is lying on the flat surface with a manageable amount of sensory input. The discomfort is there, but it is being contained inside a body that has limited options. Then you arrive. The mattress pressure disappears. Gravity shifts. The inner ear registers movement. The chest meets your chest. Your smell is suddenly stronger. Your voice is closer. Your hands are now part of the baby's world. In 2 seconds, the sensory environment is completely different. And just as important, the social environment is completely different too. Now the distress is no longer alone. That point matters more than most parents realize. Babies this age are beginning to learn simple contingencies, not stories, not plans, not emotional theories, just patterns. When I signal, sometimes someone comes. When someone comes, the state can change. When a familiar person picks me up, something in the world is now available. That was not available a moment ago. The nervous system may respond to that availability or by dropping the strained partial version of the signal and moving into a fuller one. The bigger cry may not be a new problem. It may be the original problem, finally getting full volume. Adults do versions of this all the time, even if we forget it when we look at babies. People hold it together at work, in public, in the car, in the waiting room, in the hallway outside a hospital room. Then the minute they reach someone safe, the body does something very different. The jaw loosens, the breathing changes. Tears come harder than they did 5 minutes earlier. The safe person did not cause the feeling. The safe person changed, whether the feeling still had to stay controlled. Safety can release what isolation keeps tight. A baby cannot explain that, but the body can still do it. And this is why the crying in your arms can sound so different. Before pickup, the fuss may be thin, repetitive, almost mechanical. After pickup, it can become wet, breathless, broken, urgent. Parents hear that shift and think, now it is worse. Sometimes it really is more intense. But more intense is not always more dangerous. Sometimes it means the system has stopped rationing the signal. The baby is no longer crying into empty space. The crying is now aimed at someone. The fuss was the alert. The bigger cry is the handoff. That difference is incredibly useful for a faceless video. Because you can see it, the baby alone gives you one kind of body. Tight brow, legs rubbing, hands fluttering, short whimpers. The baby in arms gives you another. Back arch, mouth wide, red face, fists closing, chest heaving, cheeks pressed into a shirt. One is held in distress. The other is distress in motion. That is not poetry. That is the nervous system changing how it uses the body. Once regulation is available nearby, and there is another piece, that makes this feel more dramatic than it is. Being picked up can briefly raise arousal before it lowers it. The movement itself is a lot. Pressure changes, position changes, vestibular input changes. Even a loving transition is still a transition. So there are really two things happening at once. The body is reacting to being moved, and the emotional system is reacting to no longer being alone with the feeling. That is why the first few seconds after pickup are often the worst place to judge whether the soothing is working. Do not mistake the spike for the whole arc. This is what people mean at their best when they talk about co-regulation, not a magic trick, not instant silence, not the adult erasing the baby's feelings with enough bouncing or enough shushing. Co-regulation is a process in which a bigger, steadier nervous system helps a smaller one move through a state it cannot yet carry well alone. Sometimes that process starts with release, not relief. Comfort is not always the end of crying. Sometimes it is the place crying can finally tell the truth. Researchers who study caregiver responsiveness often describe regulation as a sequence, not a switch. The baby signals, the adult responds, the adult adjusts, the baby reorganizes. That reorganization is not always smooth. There can be escalation in the middle. There can be mismatch in repair. There can be a louder cry before the exhale, a stiffer back before the body softens, a sharp protest before the shoulders drop. Healthy regulation is often messy. While it is happening, the middle can look worse. Before the end looks better. That is why this behavior so often shows up most strongly with the people the baby depends on most. A familiar caregiver is not just a warm body. They come loaded with memory, smell, timing, voice, expectation, and previous experiences of being helped. The baby is not only being held, the baby is reaching the place where help usually lives. So the louder crying in your arms is not always evidence that your presence caused the problem. Sometimes it is evidence that your presence changed what the baby no longer had to hide. They are not crying harder because you failed. They may be crying harder because you matter. That is the emotional pivot parents need most. Because hidden inside this pattern is a private fear. I made it worse by trying to help. But the deeper possibility is almost the opposite. Your arrival may have made it possible for the baby to stop containing what they were barely managing alone. Your arms may not be where the distress was created. Your arms may be where the distress no longer has to stay tidy. You are not just comforting them. You are becoming the place the feeling can land. That does not mean every louder cry in arms is automatically a beautiful attachment moment. Bodies are still bodies. Sometimes there is pain, reflux, exhaustion, overstimulation, hunger, or a position the baby dislikes. That is why patterns matter. On its own, a baby crying more once picked up does not usually mean something is wrong. Many babies this age intensify briefly when contact, motion, and social availability all change at once. But if crying in arms is consistently extreme, prolonged, paired with feeding pain, strong back arching, breathing changes, unusual stiffness, or distress that never eases after a reasonable stretch of soothing, it is worth bringing up with a pediatric professional. Still, in ordinary daily life, this pattern often means something far more hopeful than parents first assume. A baby between 4 and 6 months is not only learning how to be soothed, they are learning what happens when a feeling meets a person. They are learning that distress can have somewhere to go. They are learning that emotional states do not have to stay sealed inside a small body until they burn out on their own. This is how safety gets read. This is how co-regulation stops being a theory and becomes a body experience. This is how a child begins to learn what people are for. So the next time your baby seems only mildly fussy in the crib, stroller, or carrier, and then cries harder the moment you pick them up and begin to soothe, do not decide too quickly that you ruin the moment. Watch longer. Watch the first spike. Watch the release. Watch the body after the wave. This is not a strange little contradiction. This is development happening in real time. They are not falling apart because comfort failed. They are learning that when the right person arrives, they do not have to hold the feeling by themselves anymore.